Hello and welcome to The Outsiders, our first ever live show, coming to you from a very swanky hotel in the middle of London. So if you can hear the pianos tinkling, it isn't me and it's not Zach, it's a guest pianist who's playing for your privilege. But unfortunately we can't do much about it, so please tolerate it and go with the flow. So Zach, how do you feel about this first experience here in London?
Yeah, it's amazing. We're live.
We are, I think.
And we're together. We are real.
We are
here.
real human beings.
Which you won't be able to see on the audio podcast, obviously, but we are actually together in the same room, in a secret location.
So let's begin anyway. So we're now on to episode number 7, and our theme for number 7 is change, which is quite a large topic. But the idea behind our podcast, The Outsiders, is that we are operating, or what we're trying to create is an expressive and freestyle podcast where we will use where we create and express our own take on life and what it means to be an outsider and how that impacts on our own life choices, our place in society, our health, our wealth and our relationships. And we use film, we use music, we use the arts as a foundation for our discussions. So let's get on with it and let's start with change. So Zach, what does change mean to you?
Change is a big one, isn't it?
It is.
So I'll start with a story that I heard just the other day. It was about the company called Kodak, who I'm wearing their T-shirt today.
It wasn't planned that way.
Not planned that way, but yeah, obviously not free advertising. But so they, when they were a very big film developer, well, they didn't develop films, didn't they? And of course digital came in, and Kodak didn't see digital as the future, so they carried on pursuing their film, the development, and you were limited to usually 30 or 40 photographs per film, or cine, when it came with cine films, you were limited to 3 minutes per 50-foot reel. So of course they didn't go along with that. They ignored the whole digital thing, and their business suffered accordingly. And a similar thing happened to Blockbuster, the video rental, when Netflix came out. So of course what we're trying to say here today is that go with it, go with the change, keep adapting and learning. That's kind of what their story tells us, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, and it worked, but those both, obviously Kodak was working both in the professional market as well as in the domestic market, so it got hit both on both sides. So they didn't see the change coming. I'd like to link that story to one that connects to my own background, and that is my grandfather, rest his soul, was an immigrant, and he was a German, and he fought in the First World War. He was on the he was in the cavalry, and so he was fighting on horses. Can you imagine the First World War? And he won the Iron Cross for bravery, which is quite something.
Yeah.
Move on 20 years, and he was being chased out of the country by the Nazis.
Yeah.
But by that stage, he'd become an industrialist, so he had a real full life. And he had built up this business, and he escaped through the help of some nuns. So he was quite a popular boy.
Yeah, absolutely.
He got saved by the nuns, and he found his way, but obviously sent my father and my grandmother ahead of him. And he found his way back to the UK and built it up again from scratch.
Crikey.
So he had to build up a whole business all again. And he had to spend at least 4 years as a prisoner.
Yeah.
So he had to prove that he was trustworthy, etc.
Wow.
So he had to go through all of these hurdles, and he had to adapt to all of the background, all the things that were thrown at him. So he did it. However, he created this business that my father inherited, but my father wasn't built the same way, you see. And he didn't see how that business that was basically around the food industry, how the technology had evolved. And he couldn't see it, and he thought it would just take care of itself. And it didn't. And in the end, he wasn't ready for it. What that meant to us as a family is that we had to adapt to change. And that change came in the form of us moving into a completely different life. because he didn't have the vision of change, and therefore our whole lives had to, to change with it. But what I learned growing up was that you had to be able to adapt and change, because if you didn't, you'd just be left like Kodak or my father. So I've constantly evolved and changed, and it's been one learning curve for me that I have, found very valuable.
It's a very important one, very important learning curve, because obviously the world doesn't stand still. The Earth doesn't stand still in the universe. It's constantly adapting and changing to the environment around it, and our lives are the same. So the idea that you never change, it doesn't really work. It doesn't help you as an individual at all.
Be prepared.
Keep adapting and if you've got to learn something new, then enjoy the learning experience.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen overnight. Nothing does. You just have to be able to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Please excuse that interruption. We weren't really ready for that, but that just shows you how rough and ready we are, and we are adaptable too. So now let's move on. Zach, are there any films that come to mind with the theme of change?
Well, there's a great one that instantly comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's in the scene. It's at the end of Back to the Future, where you've got Marty McFly's gone through this whole thing, and one single event that takes place in that film, I hope it's not a spoiler for everybody, changes his parents, basically, which ultimately then changes his life. And it just took one event for that to happen. So you saw the contrast at the beginning of the film of this sort of
downbeaten young lad.
He was sort of bullied throughout his life, and just by him being encouraged to face up to that bully meant that when he returned, and Marty McFly returned to his new future,
yes,
his parents were completely different, full of confidence, successful, and doing things.
So by standing up to Biff and bashing him, his whole life changed for him.
And maybe that should be a motto to take away today.
Bash Biff.
Bash that Biff.
All right. Okay. What about music? I was thinking there's a couple of songs that came to my mind.
Yeah.
One that's very close to my heart is by David Bowie, and that's Changes.
Changes.
Zach's going to sing it for us, which would be nice.
The piano stops now.
Yeah, what the hell's going on? So Changes. And the other one that I loved very much is a song by the Lightning Seeds.
Yeah.
What
was the name of the song though? I can't...
It was Drive, I think. You Can't Change. I can't remember, but it was really good. Really good.
I love the Lightning Seeds.
Oh yeah, well we should sing that as well, but we'll hold back from it today. But so there's a couple. Can you think of a song that?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tears for Fears.
Oh yeah.
I actually went to see them in Wembley Arena years ago. They're Sowing a Seeds of Love concert, and because I had to get the last train home, being a rural person that I am, and not being used to this London life, I saw two songs because they were on late. So and then I had to get the train. So I saw two songs, but I could have seen another 12, I presume. But the song I'm thinking of is Change.
Yeah.
By Tears for Fears.
Everyone's doing it.
The 80s one.
Everyone's doing it.
Everyone's doing it.
Change is a key in our lives, or it's a factor in life.
Yeah.
Change is non-negotiable.
We change as we
evolve.
We're getting older.
Yeah. Well, speak for yourself. Anyway, yeah. So so this is it. What about you? Have you come up with any issues or stories or experiences that you'd like to share with us? We'd love to hear them. I'm going to put our Facebook link in the chat so you can have a look at that.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear your own takes on the topic of change, or any songs or films or any art or anything that you've got that represents change to you. We'd love to hear
change that you went through. Sometimes it can be something that at the time seems quite a small detail, quite insignificant, but it starts the process of a huge change.
Yeah.
And you might not realise it yourself at the time that the decision you're making or whatever you're doing can lead to something.
Yeah,
huge.
I mean, anything from diets to the way you exercise to the way you live your life, changing from not drinking anymore or anything like that. Careers. I mean, crikey, how many times have we changed those?
Blimey, I've lost count.
Yeah, me too. So all of these things are just a fact of life.
Yeah.
But they make an impact. And I think the last topic I wanted to really raise is how, as outsiders, we view the idea of change. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think personally, coming from the outsiders, I think we can be quite open to change, because I think as the way that we sort of see the world and feel about the world, that it sort of demands that sort of thing. We're also rebellious by nature, and when you get stuck in a rut, or when you're repeating the same patterns every day, I certainly tend to want to try and sort of jazz it up a bit and make something a bit different. One of the jobs I had, you're just going into an office, you're repeating the same day, and at 5 o'clock you finish, and then you're in the same traffic, you see the same cars, and then you go home.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was writing my book, having left a very good job, I was also stuck in a rut. And in fact, I've written a poem called "Stuck in a Rut," which I'll share in the group, whatever. But really, that was all about that, because basically, if you don't feel strong enough to stand up to that change and make it yourself, your insides will shake you up and down and do it for you. So you have to make that change, because obviously it's not good for your spirit, it's not good for your whole being. And if you're not being good to yourself, how can you be good to others?
Exactly.
And it goes round and round. So "Stuck in a Rut" is a poem I will share with you. But I think it is significant that the change that comes along will come along unless you can be flexible and adapt, preferably ahead of the game if you can see it coming. And from an outsider's perspective, Zach, that's what we've been doing all our lives.
Yeah.
It's about survival. It's about doing the best we can do given our characteristics.
Yeah, and don't be scared. It's fighting through that fear, isn't it? It's natural to feel the fear of change, because you don't know what's going to happen or how it works. But you do adapt and you learn. And the more you learn, when you learn about something, it's difficult at the beginning, but by the time you've got through, it's like learning lines for a play. It's difficult. You wouldn't walk on stage without doing the rehearsal period.
Very few do and get away with it, that's
Exactly,
for sure.
you do, but by doing the rehearsal period, then you get to a point where it's second nature.
Yeah.
And it's just that's the change process, isn't it? Don't fear it, and if it feels right in your heart,
Embrace it
Yeah.
and go with it. So I think that's really our take on the topic of change, and hopefully it's given you some food for thought, hopefully. As I said, we'd love to hear your stories or your thoughts or your shares of any kind. Please join us on Facebook, and we will do some broadcasts from the Facebook page from time to time, and we will have various other activities and events coming along as well.
Yeah.
But I think, as far as we're concerned on the topic
Yeah.
of change, that's us.
we're done. That's change for the time being. We ought to leave this place soon,
Yeah, that's true.
because they keep looking at us strangely.
Because we're not the average guest, you know what I mean?
Know
They
what I
can
mean?
sense it. They can
Yeah.
sense it. Anyway, love talking with you and loved being together today.
It's been
actually,
amazing.
to do this.
It's been
Yeah.
great fun. Had a lovely day.
Yeah. So we're going to post some pictures as well from our
Yeah.
day in the park. We've enjoyed getting out. So anyway, from London, we will say. We won't say hasta la vista, will we? We'll say cheerio.
Cheerio.
See you.